I have a gun in my purse. They trying to make me get out the car. She's busting my window again.
On a warm July night in 2024, two women were shot during an altercation with another woman in Cincinnati, Ohio's Avondale neighborhood, while both victims initially survived. 29-year-old Naima Norton succumbed to her injuries about 6 weeks after the shooting. The accused killer, 23-year-old Akira Fletcher, shared her version of events in a social media post prior to her arrest. It was accompanied by a series of videos which appeared to show Norton and the other victim harassing her before the shooting. Fletcher claimed that she had placed 2 911 calls asking for help, while the two women punched her in the face and threw rocks at her, and she accused Norton of trying to get into her car. In one of the videos, Fletcher appeared to be sitting in her car while Norton and the other woman circled around the vehicle, taunting her. Fletcher narrated as she filmed, stating that the women were slashing her tires as she warned them that they were going to jail and reminded them that she had a gun. The footage also showed several of Fletcher's car windows being damaged. Despite the shocking nature of the videos, Fletcher's self-defense claim was not strong enough to spare her from being charged with aggravated murder, felonious assault, and other crimes. Her attorney is now arguing on her behalf based on the same grounds, and it appears as though a jury will be tasked with deciding whether the shooting was justified. To make matters even more complicated, Fletcher reportedly has a history of conflict with the victims. About a month before the shooting, she was accused of smashing Norton's car windows. In that case, she was charged with misdemeanor criminal damage and released on her own recognizance. The case was still pending when she was indicted on her newest batch of charges. Fletcher is currently free on a $150,000 bond as she awaits the outcome of her case. Number 9. Jamaila Crockett. 38-year-old Joseph Bunch III was shot in the parking lot of a Baton Rouge, Louisiana apartment building during the early morning hours in August of 2017. By the time responding officers arrived at the scene at around 4 in the morning, he was dead. As they worked to secure the scene, a woman approached them and identified Bunch's fiancée, 26-year-old Jamaila Crockett, as the shooter. The witness, who happened to be Crockett's friend, said that she and Crockett were walking together when the woman pulled a gun and shot Bunch in the back. During questioning, Crockett claimed that she and Bunch had gotten into an altercation inside one of the apartments. She accused Bunch of beating her, locking her in the bathroom, and threatening her with a gun prior to the shooting. According to Crockett's version of events, she eventually saw an opportunity to grab the gun and flee the residence with her 2 children. She claimed that Bunch chased after her, giving her no choice but to shoot him in self-defense. Crockett was released after her initial interview, but surveillance footage and other evidence called her story into question. Moreover, the account given by one of her children seemed inconsistent with her claims. In the security video, Bunch could be seen raising his hands and backing away from Crockett, who shot him after he began walking away. Police noticed that Crockett had several injuries, including a busted lip, but Bunch did not appear to pose a threat to the woman when she pulled the trigger. Crockett was charged with second-degree murder and booked into custody with bail set at $200,000. She was convicted as charged in 2019, resulting in a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. While awaiting sentencing, Crockett gave birth to a child who succumbed to a tragic fate while in the care of his father, Terrence Ransom, who is currently serving prison time for manslaughter. Number 8. Christine Ricci. In early 2021, 46-year-old Christine Ricci stabbed her husband, 51-year-old Michael Ricci, at their home in Marshfield, Massachusetts. Emergency responders rushed Michael to the emergency room, where the Boston firefighter of 23 years was declared dead. Christine initially told police that Michael had come inside from shoveling snow in a state of explosive anger during a 3-day manic episode. She claimed that her husband had sustained his fatal injury by falling on the knife that was found near his body. To investigators, the stab wound to Michael's heart and the long scratch along his back were indicative of an attack. When it became clear that her story wasn't holding up, She claimed that Michael had lunged at her while she was holding a knife out of a fear for her safety, inadvertently stabbing him in the process. Christine insisted she had acted in self-defense, but failed to convince investigators and was charged with first-degree murder. The incident occurred while the couple was fighting, which reportedly happened so often that their teenage daughter later said that she had gotten used to the dysfunction. During Christine's trial, multiple witnesses testified that she had been unable to let go of her anger over an affair Michael had in 2018, roughly 3 years before the deadly altercation. According to prosecutors, it was this inability to move on which led to a series of heated arguments that eventually resulted in Michael's death. Following a 6-day trial in August of 2024, a Plymouth County jury found Christine guilty of second-degree murder and assault and battery with a deadly weapon. She was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 20 years for the murder charge, followed by 6 years for the assault and battery charge, which means she'll spend a minimum of 26 years behind bars before she becomes eligible for release. Number 7. Valenia McLean. 33-year-old Willie Breeden of Gastonia, North Carolina, was fatally shot by his girlfriend, Valenia McLean, in 2020. His death came on the heels of a years-long relationship that was fraught with domestic violence. Breeden and McLean met in 2016 and quickly moved in together. By 2017, McLean was pregnant with their child. Her son from a previous relationship, who lived with the couple, called 911 on numerous occasions with allegations that Breeden had physically abused and threatened to kill his mother. In 2019, roughly a year before Breeden's death, he shot McLean in the leg with an AR-style rifle. Authorities charged him in connection with the incident, but the case was dismissed after McLean told his defense attorney that Breeden had accidentally shot her while cleaning the weapon and showing her how to use it. After Breeden's death the following year, McLean was charged with murder. During her trial in late 2023, her attorney argued that she had acted in self-defense when Breeden charged at her, while the prosecution accused McLean of provoking Breeden into hitting her so she would bear telltale signs of abuse. According to the district attorney who pursued the case, McLean did this with the express goal of being able to kill Breeden out of a long-standing grudge while claiming self-defense. The state backed up this claim by pointing out that Breeden was unarmed and did not have access to any guns when the fatal shooting occurred. Additionally, the prosecution presented evidence in the form of a jailhouse phone call between McLean and her father, during which McLean reportedly admitted that she knew Breeden was not posing a threat to her safety when she pulled the trigger. After deliberating for just 2 hours, the jury found McLean guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 20 to 25 years in prison and will become eligible for parole in 2043 at the age of 53. Number 6. Britany Smith. During the early hours one morning in January of 2018, police in Stevenson, Alabama responded to a call of shots fired at a local residence. Officers arrived to find 38-year-old Joshua Todd Smith of Jasper, Tennessee, dead from a gunshot wound inside the home. Investigators identified the shooter as Christopher Kenneth McCallie and his sister, 32-year-old mother of 4, Britany Joyce Smith, who claimed that Joshua had brutally assaulted her 2 days prior to the shooting. The assault happened after Britany went against her better judgment and agreed to provide a ride home to Joshua, who had previously expressed a romantic interest in her. Joshua had called her up claiming to be stranded in the cold, conveniently leaving out the fact that he had been put out after getting into a violent altercation with a family member. After Britany told McCallie about the assault, she accompanied him to Joshua's house. A violent altercation ensued between the two men, during which Britany shot Joshua, then dialed 911. Medical evidence reportedly showed that Britany had in fact been assaulted. She was nevertheless charged with Joshua's murder. As her case awaited trial more than 2 years later, she told the New Yorker that she planned to argue her case based on the state's Stand Your Ground law, which classifies certain shootings as justified on grounds of self-defense. Britany was adamant that she had acted in a lawful manner, but if the court found otherwise, she faced up to a lifetime behind bars. When the judge overseeing her case rejected her stand your ground defense and concluded that she had tried to destroy evidence, she decided it was in her best interest to avoid a trial. In October of 2020, Britany took a deal and pleaded guilty to murder and arson in exchange for a 20-year sentence with credit for time served, followed by 5 years of probation. She was released in December of 2022 after serving 3 years, and while this represented just a fraction of her total sentence, it was an unwarranted punishment in the eyes of her many supporters who have accused the authorities of arresting and jailing women for fighting back against their abusers and attackers. Since her release from prison, Britany has been arrested on 6 probation violation charges, including breaching the terms of house arrest, failing to complete a court-mandated substance abuse program, and testing positive for alcohol. She has served several jail stints in connection with these incidents, but does not appear to be in custody at this time. Number 5. Stephanie Fernandez. In May of 2014, a Massachusetts woman named Stephanie Fernandez was accused of murdering her fiancé, 31-year-old Andrew T. Wagner, who was found dead from a single stab wound to the neck at the couple's home in Worcester. The woman's pre-teen daughter, Angelina, was inside the residence at the time of the incident. She awoke to the sound of her mother screaming and went downstairs to find the home covered in blood, while a neighbor attempted to perform CPR on Wagner, who she had come to know as her stepdad. Officers took Angelina to a relative's home, and Fernandez was taken to a local police station where she underwent a 3-hour interrogation. She claimed that she stabbed Wagner in self-defense while he assaulted her, but the authorities were unconvinced by her story and charged her with murder and assault with a dangerous weapon. When the case finally went to trial in 2022, there was one thing that the prosecution and defense seemed to agree on: that the relationship between Fernandez and Wagner was wildly toxic and dysfunctional from the beginning. The two had met at an adult club in Springfield in 2009 and moved in together less than a month later. During the 5 years that the pair dated, their relationship was plagued by cheating, verbal abuse, and physical violence. Despite their obvious incompatibilities, they got engaged in 2013, but this didn't stop Fernandez from getting in touch with her ex-boyfriend, who she saw on a weekly basis behind Wagner's back. At one point, she was even engaged to both men at the same time. She had 2 engagement rings, which she treated as interchangeable pieces of jewelry depending on which man she was with at any given moment. Throughout Fernandez's court proceedings, her attorney stood by her claims of self-defense and argued that she also suffered from battered woman syndrome. The defense accused the prosecution of downplaying Wagner's abuse, and the judge overseeing the case eventually dropped the murder charge. But the jury rejected the self-defense argument and found Fernandez guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter, and she was sentenced to 8 to 10 years in prison. Number 4. Molly Fitzgerald. In December of 2019, 38-year-old Captain America actress Molly Fitzgerald was accused of murdering her mother, 68-year-old Patricia T. Fitzgerald, who was found stabbed to death inside her Olathe, Kansas home. During a 911 call, Molly claimed that she had acted in self-defense after her mother had charged at her with a knife in an attempt to kill her. She told the same story to responding officers, who arrived to find Patricia lying face down near the front door with the knife in her back. Inside the home, police found signs of a struggle, including a broken lamp and an overturned chair. Molly said that she disarmed Patricia by hitting her with a vacuum cleaner, enabling her to remove the knife from her mother's hand. She claimed she had no choice other than to kill the victim, who supposedly kept charging at her. But Patricia's autopsy told a much different story. According to the medical examiner, there were defensive wounds on Patricia's body, indicating that she had fought for her life while being attacked. There was also bruising to her neck from being choked. Based on the evidence, it was concluded that Patricia did not have a knife in her possession at any point during the deadly altercation, and that she was actually the victim. Molly, who played Stark Girl in the 2011 Marvel film Captain America: The First Avenger, was charged with second-degree murder following her mother's autopsy. She pleaded not guilty and said that she planned to represent herself, but in 2021 she was found incompetent to stand trial. In accordance with Standard protocol, the judge ordered Molly to undergo treatment at a state mental hospital in an effort to restore her to competency. According to the most recent available updates, she remains hospitalized in a secure psychiatric facility as she continues to receive treatment. At this point, it's unclear whether prosecutors plan to pursue the case in the event that her competency is restored. Number 3. Sakina Muhammad. In March of 2022, 27-year-old Quan Andre Winston Jr. was shot to death inside the Wyoming-Michigan apartment he shared with his girlfriend, 23-year-old Sakina Muhammad. Investigators were quick to turn their attention toward Muhammad, especially after learning about the volatile nature of the couple's relationship. Neighbors at their 4-unit apartment building reported hearing frequent fights between the pair. These accounts fell in line with the claims of Muhammad's mother, who called 911 on the day of Winston's death after she overheard the couple arguing during a phone call with her daughter. By the time officers responded to the residence, Muhammad had fled the scene with the couple's child. Police found Winston dead at the bottom of a staircase with a gunshot wound to the head. Witnesses told investigators that they had overheard him pleading for his life prior to his murder. They also claimed that they heard Muhammad say, "No bro, you're dead," before she fired the fatal gunshot. Muhammad turned herself in the following day and claimed that she had shot Winston in self-defense while he was choking her. At the time of the deadly encounter, Winston was not supposed to be living at the apartment. He had recently pleaded guilty to 2 domestic violence-related aggravated assault charges and, consequently, had been ordered to stay away from the residence. During her trial in November of 2023, Muhammad stuck to her self-defense claim. In the meantime, the prosecution argued that the defendant and her family did everything in their power to control the narrative. After listening to 3 days of testimony, the jury found Muhammad guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole. Today's topic was requested by Setco M420 and Artemisia 457. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Casey Dark. 45-year-old Joshua Dark was fatally shot by his wife, 26-year-old Casey Dark, during a domestic incident at the couple's Coznino, Arizona home in December of 2019. Casey claimed that she had acted in self-defense but was nevertheless charged with second-degree murder. According to prosecutors, Casey was at fault for escalating the argument to a deadly level by introducing a gun to the situation. On the other hand, Casey's defense team argued that she felt it was necessary to arm herself due to Joshua's history of violence, which she claimed had caused her to live in fear for her life. In a surprising turn of events, the judge overseeing Casey's case released her from custody in March of 2020, more than a year before her scheduled trial. She was freed on the contingency that she did not miss a single court date or any options for a plea deal could automatically be taken off the table. Casey was also ordered to remain sober and to have no contact with the victim's family. While updates on the case have not been forthcoming, records show that the young woman was convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 5 years in prison. According to her advertisement on a prison pen pal website, she is using her time behind bars to pursue a 4-year college degree in communications. Records show that she is also taking classes in plumbing, automotive repair, parenting, and peer-to-peer substance abuse recovery. She's currently at the tail end of her sentence and is working as a cook in the prison's kitchen. These lies and deceit were shocking, but how awful can it get when your business is on the line? Find out after number 1 in our previous release of when businessmen and women go wrong, so stay tuned. Number 1. Shaina Hubers. 28-year-old Ryan Carter Poston of Highland Heights, Kentucky, was an up-and-coming attorney who had no shortage of beautiful women to choose from when it came to his dating options. In 2011, he began dating a 19-year-old college student named Shaina Hubers, who he had initially connected with on social media. At that point in his life, Poston wasn't looking for a serious commitment. He soon realized that Hubers had a long-term vision for their future, and he became overwhelmed by her overbearing nature. The conflicting nature of their relationship goals became a major source of stress for the young lawyer, who described Hubers to his friends and colleagues as controlling and jealous. Over time, he complained that Hubers' behavior was becoming increasingly obsessive. It eventually reached a point where the young woman was sending Poston hundreds of text messages per day and showing up unannounced at his condo, despite living over an hour's drive away. After a year of dating on and off, Poston tried to distance himself from Hubers, but he tried to let her down easy in an attempt to avoid hurting her feelings, and her possessive and paranoid behavior only worsened. Unaware that Hubers had gained access to his social media messages, Poston made plans to go on a date with the winner of the Miss Ohio beauty pageant in October of 2012. But those plans unexpectedly changed when Hubers showed up at his home that evening and shot him 6 times in cold blood. As Poston lay dying from his injuries on his dining room floor, Shaina dialed 911 and claimed that she had shot him in self-defense. She told police that Poston had attacked her, but her story quickly fell apart. It was evident to investigators that Poston was unarmed and in a helpless position when he was shot. Moreover, when Hubers was left alone in the interrogation room, she made a series of bizarre comments, incriminating herself in the crime, apparently unaware that a surveillance camera was capturing her every word. Her behavior only became more bizarre as the night went on. Hubers requested a lawyer, but wouldn't stop talking to anyone within earshot, even as the police tried to disengage, since they're not allowed to interrogate a suspect after they ask for an attorney. The young woman's story changed several times, and her commentary was both insensitive and downright strange. At one point, Hubers said that she continued shooting Poston after firing the first gunshot in order to spare him from surviving with a deformed face because he was vain, adding that she gave him the nose job he always wanted. Hubers was convicted of Poston's murder in 2015 and was sentenced to 40 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. But she won a retrial the following year. She was convicted again in 2018 and was sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 17 years. She'll be in her early 40s when she becomes eligible for release in 2032. British businesswoman Faye Dunn was held in custody on drug charges after being detained at Manchester Airport on June the 13th of 2022. The 38-year-old mother of 2, who formerly served as the director for both a restaurant and a popular children's play centre in Merseyside, was arrested as part of local police's so-called Operation Venetic. Subsequent reports described the initiative as an investigation into the Encro chat network, which was hacked by European law enforcement. The day after her arrest, Dunn was charged with conspiracy to supply a Class B drug and money laundering. Prior to undertaking her business ventures, Dunn had played football for Leeds, Tranmere and England, but subsequently became an accountant for an organized criminal enterprise. The illegal operation, of which she was accused of taking part, reportedly involved the smuggling of over $1 million worth of illicit substances, as well as ill-obtained cash. Number 8. Umair Faroo. A woman sleeping in a hotel room in Llangollen, Denbighshire, Wales, was abruptly woken up by a strange man assaulting her on May the 27th of 2022. Court records reveal that the unnamed victim had mistakenly left the key in the door, allowing 42-year-old Umair Faroo to enter while she was asleep. The man, a respected Pakistani businessman, later claimed that he didn't know what was allowed in Britain, despite being a frequent visitor to the country. When the woman realized what was happening, she shoved Faroo away from her and ran out of the room. Upon being arrested, Faroo initially denied the abuse accusations outright, stating, "I'm Muslim, I wouldn't do that." He was nevertheless prosecuted on charges of assault and trespassing with the intent to commit an offense, to which he ultimately pleaded guilty. During a hearing in Mould Crown Court on October the 13th of 2022, Faroo was jailed for 4.5 years as punishment. Number 7. Brett Henson. At about 9 p.m. on November the 4th of 2022, an intoxicated Australian businessman threatened a 54-year-old cabbie in the central business district of Sydney before taking off with the taxi himself. The suspect, 42-year-old real estate executive Brett Henson, was captured on the cab's dashcam, allowing investigators to identify and arrest him 6 days later. Henson, who was described as a senior capital transactions manager for the property developing company Mervac, reportedly drove the stolen vehicle about 3 miles eastward before abandoning it. It was later found in Woollahra, having sustained significant damage. One of the requirements of Henson's bail conditions was weekly visits to the Waverley Police Station to submit a report. He appeared in Sydney Downing Centre Local Court in early December of 2022, facing charges of take-and-drive conveyance without the owner's consent, driving recklessly or furiously or in a dangerous speed or manner, and driving under the influence of alcohol. It was reported that the prominent developer would be due back in court sometime in 2023. Number 6. Asoma Chozi Oboa. On the night of July the 5th of 2015, 30-year-old Carrie Melvin was gunned down by a shotgun-wielding assailant as she walked down Hollywood's Sunset Boulevard with her boyfriend. The incident was initially believed to be a random act of violence. However, following further investigation, suspicions fell upon local businessman Asoma Chozi Oboa, the owner of a clothing company called Hoodfellas. The man was taken into police custody on July the 24th on suspicion of murdering Melvin, with whom he'd been allegedly embroiled in a financial dispute. According to subsequent reports on the matter, Oboa owed the woman more than $1,600 for social media marketing work she'd done for his company. Only days before she was killed, Melvin had reportedly threatened to take the man to small claims court in connection to a check that was either bounced or cancelled, rather than satisfy his delinquent debts. Oboa was accused of committing the fatal shooting, after which he fled the scene and disposed of the 12-gauge shotgun used as the murder weapon. The morning after the deadly incident, a boy came upon the gun underneath a rock near a beach in Malibu. In the summer of 2017, Oboa was convicted of the murder and sentenced to life without parole, plus an additional 25 years for the special circumstance that the crime was committed for financial gain. In 2019, the man appealed the verdict, arguing that the trial had been fundamentally unfair. However, the California Appeals Court ultimately upheld his conviction. Number 5. Michael Bryan Smith. A British businessman was held in a Dubai prison for several years past his scheduled release date, despite having been pardoned for his alleged crimes by United Arab Emirates authorities. Michael Bryan Smith, a former manager at a private international company in the UAE, was accused of forging an official document, as well as breach of trust, for which the maximum penalty is 3 years in prison. He was arrested in Thailand in May of 2009. Smith reportedly spent over 2 years in a Thai jail awaiting extradition to the UAE, during which time he claimed to have contracted HIV from a prison hospital. The businessman was finally brought to trial in Dubai Criminal Court in the summer of 2012. He was given a 12-year prison sentence and a $653,000 fine, far exceeding the purported maximum punishment under UAE law. Smith's prison term was reduced to 6 years a few months later. Then in 2014, he was officially pardoned as part of an annual general amnesty for Ramadan, but was never released. Shortly before his prison term was supposed to expire, he suddenly had an additional 10 years tacked onto his sentence for undisclosed reasons. In March of 2021, it was reported that 15 members of the British Parliament had signed a letter penned by the Euro-Mediterranean Human Rights Monitor, which urged ministers to discuss Smith's illegal detention with Dubai authorities. Number 4. Steve Shickles. During his tenure as the Chief Operating Officer of Simple Helix, LLC, in Huntsville, Alabama, Steve Shickles executed a pernicious embezzling plot, bilking his employers out of over $2.1 million in the process. The man, a resident of Round Rock, Texas, was accused of perpetrating the scheme between January of 2012 and January of 2019. In a subsequent Justice Department press release, it was detailed how Shickles had made several unauthorized transactions with the company's PayPal accounts to cover personal expenses. He also allegedly created a fake Simple Helix email account, which he used to redirect funds intended for the company into his own personal bank accounts. To cover up the fraud, Shickles fabricated documents and removed his unauthorized activities from Simple Helix's computer-generated financial report. The accused father of two was said to have used the ill-gotten funds to bankroll his lavish lifestyle, including dinners at high-end restaurants, designer clothing, private schooling for his children, hotel stays, and more than 20 luxury cars. In the summer of 2022, federal prosecutors filed wire fraud charges against Shickles, which carries a maximum penalty of 20 years in prison and a $250,000 fine. Number 3. Jorgen Fenick. Maltese anti-corruption journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia died in a car bomb explosion on October the 16th of 2017. A trio of men accused of planting and detonating the explosive device were arrested 2 months later and subsequently prosecuted. During the course of the investigation, however, the police also zeroed in on Melvin Thuema, the self-described middleman of the murder plot, who turned state's evidence in exchange for a pardon. Thuema told investigators that the mastermind of Galizia's killing was one of Malta's wealthiest businessmen, Jorgen Fenick, who evidently held reservations regarding the slain journalist's desire to expose corruption. On November the 20th of 2019, Fenick was apprehended by the authorities as he set sail on his yacht in what was believed to have been an attempt to flee the country. The man, who led a business empire with a range of interests, including property imports and a car dealership, pleaded not guilty to his alleged crimes. As of the latest developments on the matter, Fenick had been denied bail after being considered a serious flight risk. Number 2. Rafi Aslanian. In April of 2022, a businessman from La Cañada, Flint Ridge, California, was accused of devising a murder-for-hire plot aimed at eliminating 2 men involved in litigation against him. The Department of Justice identified the suspect as 53-year-old Rafi Aslanian, a real estate developer in the LA area. An employee of Aslanian's, named Cesar Rivera, allegedly met with an individual about killing the 2 targets, identified only as SE and MY. SE reportedly defeated Aslanian in court after the latter attempted to take possession of the Brentwood home in which his parents resided. In early 2022, the real estate businessman was represented in court by MY, a lawyer, but then refused to pay the man's law firm roughly $220,000 in legal fees. To get rid of the respective problems posed by these 2 men, Aslanian told Rivera to offer the prospective hitman $20,000 for the murders. Law enforcement eventually caught wind of the plot, at which point they took Rivera into custody. He agreed to cooperate with the authorities in a bid to incriminate Aslanian. On September the 15th of 2022, Rivera showed his employer a staged photograph of Essie's supposed murder. Shortly thereafter, Aslanian was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder. As of the most recent available updates, the legal proceedings were still ongoing. Number 1. Edward Shin. Throughout his adult life, California man Edward Shin repeatedly betrayed the trust of those closest to him, leading up to his eventual incarceration for murder in 2010. The man's public misadventures began when he was in his 20s and resided in Irvine with a roommate named James Moon. One day, the latter received a call from Shin's father, who said he'd received word that his son had been kidnapped and was being held for ransom. The purported kidnapper demanded $1 million from Shin's parents in exchange for his return. Days into the investigation, it emerged that the ransom email had actually been sent from within the Shin family's mansion. It was determined that the supposed victim himself had fabricated the kidnapping story in an attempt to extort his own parents. He was never criminally charged in connection to the incident, but the ordeal left him with a reputation as a shady businessman, which was further cemented several years later in 2006. Shin reportedly offered to buy Legends sports magazine for $1 million after failing to deliver on the first payment. However, he threatened the couple who owned the publication that he could make them disappear. When they attempted to sue the man, he threatened them with further violence, and they subsequently left him alone without receiving compensation for their company. Shin's nefarious business practices came to a head in 2010 when his business partner, Chris Smith, suddenly disappeared without a trace. Shin attempted to maintain the fiction that his partner was still alive by posing as him in emails to his family and friends. The messages indicated that Smith had cashed out his shares of the company that he and Shin started in order to travel the world. It would ultimately come to light that Shin had actually sent those communications, and he was subsequently arrested on suspicion of murdering Smith to take complete control over the business. Shin was eventually convicted of the murder and sentenced to life in prison, but as of the latest developments, he still hadn't revealed the resting place of Smith's remains. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get in a street fight with Mike Tyson or with Jake Paul? Let us know in the comments section below.